Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Crash-A-Thon, and man, it was just so much fun going back over the original Crash trilogy. Though each of them may have their own individual problems, overall, it's just such a solid trifecta of platforming greatness. And just when we thought it couldn't get any better, we then got CTR, one of the best kart racers ever made in my opinion. And hey, I've already done a video on that game, so I guess we'll just have to see what's up next on the list, and just when I was having a nice day. Okay, so let me lay down the context real quick. Naughty Dog had developed the Crash trilogy, establishing their games and their status as a developer in the industry for years to come. However, all was not peachy behind the scenes, as the game's publishers, Universal, yeah, they were pricks, treating the developers poorly, forcing them to work under strenuous conditions, and being very petty about certain issues. Yeah, Naughty Dog hated working for them, with the only person from there they got along with being Mark Cerny, the trilogy's producer, who basically had to act as a middleman between the two teams due to the animosity. It was so bad that when Naughty Dog wanted to make CTR, they had to make a deal where Sony would be the company in charge, just so that they didn't have to interact with Universal. Naughty Dog then understandably wanted to cut ties with them. They made CTR their last hurrah with Crash and moved on to a future as a first-party developer for Sony. But Universal, of course, still with Crash in hand, decided that they didn't need Naughty Dog and wanted to squeeze out one last game for the franchise on the PlayStation before the next generation of consoles arrived. And I guess their philosophy when looking at what to do next was, well, we did what Mario did and it turned out great, so hey look, he's doing party games now. Slap Crash's face on that and you have a perfect recipe for mediocrity, Crash Bash. So now I'd like to share with you all a little song I wrote summing up my feelings towards Crash Bash. Crash Bash is trash. Yeah, I don't like this game. Now, to me, it seems like if I were to say that a few years ago, it would have seemed like many people wouldn't have cared. However, saying it nowadays, it feels like you would receive a lot more backlash or opposition. I'm not too sure if it was just me, but I always got the impression that the Crash community didn't think much of Crash Bash. To many, it was just like, oh, that's one. But then ever since CTR Nitro Fueled got announced back in December 2018, most of what I've seen in comment sections and on Reddit is praise for Crash Bash and countless requests to remaster or remake it in the same way the original trilogy and CTR was. And I just think, why? I honestly don't get it. Was there always this appreciation for the game, or has this all just suddenly cropped up out of nowhere? It's a big talking point in the community, so I only think it's right we dive into the game to really see if there's anything here worth bringing back, or should we just let it kill over and die? I mean, if CTR could tackle a genre completely new to the franchise and nail it, then Crash Bash could surely be a great party game. Oh, fuck, I couldn't say that with a straight face. So this is Crash Bash, the final Crash game for the original PlayStation, but also the first game in the series not to be developed by Naughty Dog, and oh boy does it show! This time developed by Eurocom Software, Crash Bash is a party game consisting of multiple mini-games you can play alone or with friends. Themed around Crash and starring the Crash cast of characters, it really isn't much more complicated than that. Now there's not really much going on from the get-go since most of the mini-games are locked, since we have to unlock them by playing the game's adventure mode, complete with its own story. Aku Aku and Uka Uka just decided to have a casual meet-up in the void of space where they are, well, I wouldn't call it arguing, rather childish bickering. Mainly over whether good or evil is better. Uka Uka decides that the best way to go about this is to break some kneecaps and to fight it out. But Aku Aku says they can't do that because...
No, Uka Uka. The ancients would not allow it.
Stupid bullshit. And instead they agreed that the best way to resolve the eternal battle between the forces of good and evil would be to make their friends and allies face off in death-defying stupid little party games because of course. The only issue is that the teams are imbalanced, so Uka Uka makes Tiny and Dingo Dahl play for the good side and they just kinda accept it, I guess. I mean, I'm kinda surprised any of them are going along with any of this really. One minute you're enjoying your day and the next thing you know, team deathmatch. To be fair, Cortex does look pretty miffed, but Crash seems to be fairly content doing whatever the hell you can call this. So we begin the game's main single-player adventure mode, and it's actually structured around the classic Crash format. All the minigames are accessed from a warp room with a boss to defeat before you progress to the next one, so that's kinda nice. So let's tackle these one by one, shall we? First up is Crash Ball. You're in a square arena with one player on each side, with the aim being to deflect the balls away from your goal and into the other player's goals. And it's fairly decent. It can get a bit too chaotic at times, but I feel overall a good concept for a minigame. Next up is Polar Panic. The goal here is to use your charge attack to knock each of the players off the arena while combating the ice physics, with the occasional power-up thrown into the mix. Again, not a bad minigame, nothing too exciting though, and it did tend to either drag on for ages or be over in a few seconds. The third minigame is Pogo Painter, and I actually really like the idea behind this one. You're in a grid-based arena and you have to hop over as many squares as you can to mark them with your colour of paint, and then break into these randomly spawning crates to cash in your points depending on how many squares you've covered. There's power-ups to help you cover horizontal or vertical lines in your colour, or a speed power-up to cover more ground faster and to outrun your opponents. The control is a bit more on the heavy and slow side, and it does again get a bit chaotic with so much shit happening on screen at once, but overall a pretty decent minigame. The final one for this warp room is called Jungle Bash, definitely my least favourite so far. It's basically just an arena fight. Damage your opponents by either throwing crates at them or by giving them a hefty bitch slap. Kill the rest of them, last man standing wins. So my impressions from the first warp room are okay, a few good minigame ideas. I would say it's not a bad start if the game didn't make simply completing these minigames fucking boring. You see, the main collectible you need for progressing are the trophies, and in order to win one, you have to win the same minigame 3 times. And okay, that may not seem too bad at first until you realise that you have to keep playing the same minigame over and over until one character wins 3 times. So you could potentially be playing these up to 9 times at the most, and even then you're not guaranteed a win. This is one of the biggest flaws in Crash Bash's adventure mode. The thing is, these are simple party minigames. These kind of things work best when playing them in quick bursts. But when you're forced to potentially replay them over and over again consecutively, it just sucks any fun these games had right out and makes for such a tedious and mind-numbing experience. But anyway, I got all the trophies in the first warp room and we get to face our first boss, Papu Papu. It has the same mechanics as Jungle Bash. You avoid his attacks, kill these little weird Crash minions and grab boxes to throw at him. A pretty good first boss, definitely leaps and bounds ahead of the piss take fight he had in the first game. Okay, second warp room now. First one was okay, but a bit of a slog, so let's hope this one is a bit more positive. First minigame in this one is Beach Ball, and yeah, this is just Crash Ball again. Except this time you can magnetically hold the balls on your pod and then launch them. Okay, it's not really that much of a change to warrant it being its own minigame though. So next in the second warp room is Tilt Panic, and it's the same as Polar Panic, but the arena tilts. Okay, so what about the next minigame, Pogo-A-Go-Go? It's the same as Pogo Painter with a different way of scoring. I'm starting to sense a pattern here. Next up is Space Bash. It's, get this, Jungle Bash, but in space. I love variety. Again, only difference here is that the floor disappears, yay. Capping this warp room off, we have a new minigame, Desert Fox, and holy shit, Crash is packing a machine of war. This minigame is a tank battle where you have to destroy the other players with your projectiles and mines. The controls can take some getting used to, and it does feel fairly unbalanced and messy with every character just spamming attacks like crazy. It just feels like there's very little strategy to this one. Okay, and on to the next boss fight, and oh. So it seems in order to unlock the next boss, you need not only trophies, but gems and crystals. See, each minigame has a gem and crystal to be won. They basically require you to play the minigame under a strict condition, like winning it in a certain amount of time, starting with less health than your opponents, or adding extra obstacles to generally put you at a disadvantage. Thankfully though, you only have to complete these minigames once under these conditions. Though it's during these tasks especially that it starts to sink in, Crash Bash is fucking hard. Whether it be the trophy, gem, or crystal challenges, this game can be brutally difficult. Mainly down to the fact that the AI are insanely relentless. Honestly, they show you no goddamn mercy. But then when you combine that with the constant repetition and general chaos of things, it tends to not only become tedious, but also frustrating as hell. And you can kinda start to piece together why I'm not really a big fan of this game. I swear, the AI just feels like they are out for blood the countless times I have heard. Oh yeah, and speaking of which, here's Rilaroo, a brand new character they just shat out of nowhere for this game, and he never showed up again until Nitro Fuel. He's just this stupid anomaly within the franchise whose only purpose in this game, it seems, was to hold this blowjob face throughout. Okay, so now that I have enough gems and crystals as well, let's tackle the game's second boss, the Bearminator. This time, using the gameplay of the Polar Bear minigames, you gotta knock these robot bears off for a chance to grab a missile to shoot the Bearminator. And one thing I will say this game does pretty good actually are the boss fights. It's not really something you expect from a party game, but for how they translate the gameplay of the minigames into a boss battle format, it works pretty damn well. Okay, so now onto the third warp room. First up is Embolism, and it's just Crash Ball and Beach Ball again, but occasionally Engine decides to have a seizure. Okay, but surely Melt Panic will be original. It's the Polar Bear game again, except the arena gets smaller as you go. El Pogo Loco, it's the Pogo minigame, except Rilaroo comes in to make your life miserable. Next up is Snowbash. Okay, I've got a good feeling about this one. This is the arena battle in the snow. Fuck! Again, the only slight difference here is that there's ice physics and this penguin can hurt you. Whatever. Next, Metal Fox, another one of the tank minigames where this time the arena layout changes at random. And to be fair, I find that this change actually helps keep this variation a bit more balanced and under control, so there's that, I guess. Next up is Dot Dash, a new game. Yeah, forgive me for sounding actually surprised here, since the vast majority of this game's content is the same stuff recycled over and over. Unfortunately though, this is perhaps the worst one yet. It's a basic race around this circle, and you can cheese this one really easily by just hugging the inner circle. Anyway, that's all the minigames for this area, so on to the third boss, and please do excuse me for a second while I go get more gems and crystals. Okay, so as I was saying, the third boss, Big Bad Fox. I don't really know what to expect from this one. Oh, okay, scratch that, it's the Komodo Bros. Again though, a solid ass boss fight. Taking the tank gameplay, you have to destroy the Komodo Bros machine. Then the fight moves on to a second phase where you have to take them on in a 2 versus 1 battle. Oh, and the accompanying music, banging. To be fair actually, most of Crash Bash's soundtrack is surprisingly really damn good, introducing several new pieces while also including fantastic remixes and new variations of existing tracks from the series. I only wish I could say the same for the game's visuals. Definitely the worst looking of all the Crash games on PS1. The character models especially just look so cheap, stiff and jilted. But anyway, we're at the fourth warp room now, and I won't lie, it's been a slog to get here, so I'm really hoping things will pick up now. The first minigame is Skyballs. This is the same as all the other ball ones. Yep, I'm fucking done. Okay, I'm sorry guys, I would like to get to the end of it all, but this game has just made it so that I just can't be asked to at all. And I know for a fact that I'm not missing much with this warp room and the secret warp room, since it's just more of the same. The last new minigame introduced is Ring Ding, where you have to pop all of the balloons of your colour. And to briefly sum it up, Ring Ding doesn't ring my ding, so there. I'm sorry to say, I really didn't enjoy my time with Crash Bash. I was really hoping that upon this replay of it, I'd see something new. Something that all the people who like this game and who want to see it make a return see in it. But really, when I sit back and take a look at it as a whole, Crash Bash boils down to 7 mini-games of varying quality copied and pasted 4 times each, with such small changes made to them in one of the worst excuses for variety I've ever seen. And it doesn't help that half my time playing these was a hectic, chaotic mess, and the other half was a tedious, frustrating drag. Yeah, the soundtrack was great and the bosses were very creative in how they adapted the gameplay of the mini-games, but outside of that, yeah, I don't think this is a good game. I wouldn't say it's terrible by any means. I'm sure the minigames would be a lot more enjoyable in multiplayer, seeing as that's how most party games like this are ideally played. And I think there's a couple good concepts for minigames here, but I just hate that the game's justification for content is by recycling them over and over. There is certainly potential here. It would be great to see a return for local co-op party games. I mean, hell, just look at Super Mario Party's success. But I feel if Crash was to ever take another stab at this genre, it's probably best that they start from the ground up with an entirely new idea, because Crash Bash as is, And with that, Crash Bash brought an end to the PS1 era of Crash Bandicoot. Hard to think it was all going so well, huh? Whatever. You really shouldn't dwell on these things. You really ought to look to the future, in fact, you know? And I'm sure with Crash's next game, it could only get better. Life is cruel.